Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This
Hmm.
time we're tackling something that I think a lot of us struggle with,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that is the idea of mindful eating.
Absolutely.
I think, you hear it everywhere these days. It's kind of become a buzzword.
It really has. Yeah.
But I think there's a lot more to it than maybe meets the eye. So we're going to kind of peel back the layers today and see what's really going on there.
Yeah. I think it's presented a lot of times as this quick fix, this easy solution, but like anything when it comes to well-being, there's a lot more nuance to it.
Right.
And it's not always as simple as it sounds.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to dive into that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So I think, one of the core principles we hear about with mindful eating is this idea of being present.
Yes.
And, on the surface, it sounds pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
Just, pay attention to your food. But I think in our modern world, that can be surprisingly difficult.
It is. And I think that's what's really interesting is that a lot of the sources that we're looking at today kind of highlight that tension between our modern lifestyle and the kind of almost ancient roots of these mindfulness practices.
All right.
Even just doing simple things like having the TV on or scrolling on your phone while you're eating.
Oh, yeah.
Research shows that that can actually dampen your awareness of taste and fullness cues.
Right.
So you end up potentially eating more without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's almost like your brain's so busy processing all those other inputs
Mm-hmm.
that's not really paying attention to what's going on
Right.
in your stomach.
Yeah, and one of the studies that we looked at actually suggested that eating while you're distracted can even lead to what they call sensory amnesia,
Oh, wow.
where you don't even remember the experience of eating later on.
That's wild.
It's like your meal just vanishes from your memory.
That is a little spooky.
Right.
So I guess step one, if we're going to kind of embrace mindful eating,
Yeah.
is putting down the phone,
Yeah.
turning off the TV,
Yeah, creating that space.
and just like focusing on the food.
Absolutely. And I think that ties into another really important principle, which is slowing down.
Okay.
It's not just about taking smaller bites. It's about creating space between those bites to really savor the experience.
I've heard that slowing down can also help with digestion.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any truth to that?
There's actually quite a bit of research on this. One of the sources that we looked at cited a study where people who chewed each bite thoroughly had better nutrient absorption and fewer digestive issues.
Interesting.
And so the theory is that when you chew more, you're breaking down the food into smaller particles.
Okay.
And it makes it easier for your body to process.
So it's not just about like table manners.
Right.
It's about actually giving your digestive system a break.
Right.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah, and there's an interesting psychological component to slowing down as well.
Okay.
Some researchers believe that it allows for what they call sensory-specific satiety to kick in. And this basically means that as you eat a certain food, your pleasure from that specific food decreases, which naturally leads you to eat less.
So the more you savor something, the less you actually crave it.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
it's kind of counterintuitive,
It is.
but think about it. If you gobble down a bag of chips mindlessly, you probably don't even realize you're full until the whole bag is gone.
Right.
But if you take your time and savor each chip, allow those flavors to really hit your palate, you're more likely to feel satisfied sooner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to see how these different principles kind of work together.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, life gets busy. Is it realistic to expect ourselves to eat mindfully, like literally every single time we eat something?
That's where this principle of non-judgment comes in.
Okay.
And I think this is a really important one because mindful eating isn't about being perfect. It's about cultivating awareness.
Okay.
So if you find yourself, scarfing down a sandwich at your desk, don't beat yourself up about it. Just notice it, acknowledge it, and maybe make a different choice next time.
So it's like giving ourselves permission to be human.
Exactly.
Which I think can be a struggle sometimes.
It is. And, I think a lot of us get caught up in that all or nothing mentality.
Right.
Either we're eating perfectly or we've completely blown it and there's no in between.
Right.
And I think that's what's so powerful about mindful eating is it shifts the focus away from those strict rules and restrictions.
Right.
And it's more about a gentle and compassionate approach to nourishment.
I love that.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering about the emotional side of eating.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I know for myself, I tend to reach for certain foods when I'm stressed or upset.
Of course. Yeah.
How does mindful eating kind of address that?
That's a great question. And it's something that a lot of the sources that we're looking at really dive into.
Okay.
And, they highlight the importance of distinguishing between physical hunger and emotional hunger.
Hmm.
And mindful eating can help you become more attuned to those subtle cues.
Right.
So you can make more conscious choices.
So instead of automatically grabbing that pint of ice cream when I'm feeling down, maybe I pause and I ask myself, am I actually hungry?
Right.
Or am I just trying to soothe myself?
Yeah. Are you looking for a hug and a bowl?
Exactly.
And sometimes just having that awareness is enough to shift your behavior.
Right.
You might choose to engage in a different activity that addresses that underlying emotion, like maybe going for a walk or talking to a friend or journaling even.
Journaling, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
One of the sources we looked at actually suggests keeping a food and mood journal to track your eating habits and notice any patterns, because that can help you identify specific triggers for emotional eating, and then you can develop healthier coping mechanisms.
So it's like turning mindful eating into a self-discovery process.
It is. It can lead to some really powerful insights. You might start to realize that you tend to overeat when you're feeling lonely or bored or stressed.
Right.
And then once you've identified those triggers, you can start to address them in more constructive ways.
So it's not just about what we eat, it's about why we eat.
Exactly.
And that's like a whole other layer to this.
It does, and it reminds us that mindful eating is about more than just weight management or physical health.
Right.
It's about cultivating this deeper understanding of our relationship with food and with ourselves.
I'm really liking this already. It's so much more than just another, eat your vegetables lecture.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? What else should we be thinking about as we explore mindful eating?
Well, we've talked about the principles, the emotional side of things, but what about the actual experience of eating?
Right.
There's a lot to unpack there in terms of engaging your senses, tuning into your body's cues, and even the role of gratitude.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. It's like, okay, we've got the mental and emotional kind of framework in place. But what about the actual sensory experience of mindful eating?
Right.
I want to explore that.
Let's do it. It's really about shifting from just consuming food to truly experiencing it.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm really curious about. We've talked about the mental and emotional aspects,
Right.
but what about the actual sensory experience of mindful eating?
Yeah, it's like going from watching a movie on your phone to seeing it on the big screen.
Okay.
Suddenly all these details you missed before, the colors, the sounds, it's like that for your meals.
So it's more than just tasting then, right?
Right.
What are some of the senses that we can kind of tap into when we're eating mindfully?
Well, our sources talk about tuning into the visual appeal of your food.
Okay.
Like really noticing the shapes, the colors, the textures.
Okay.
It sounds silly, but it can actually make your meal more satisfying.
I can see that, appreciating the artistry of a beautiful dish.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got sight. What about the other senses?
Smell is another big one that we often overlook. Take a moment to inhale the aroma of your food before you even take a bite. That can actually trigger your digestive juices and enhance your enjoyment.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, certain smells can instantly transport you back to a memory you're a feeling.
Totally. And then, of course, there's taste.
Right.
But mindful eating takes tasting to a whole new level.
Okay.
It's about savoring each bite, paying attention to those subtle nuances of flavor. You know how the sweet, salty, sour, and bitter all kind of interplay with each other?
So we're like flavor detectives now.
Exactly.
I like that.
And don't forget about texture.
Oh, right.
Noticing the crunch of a carrot, the creaminess of yogurt that melts in your mouth, sensation of chocolate.
Yes.
All of that adds another dimension.
So it's really about turning eating into this multisensory experience. Okay, I'm with you there. But what about those internal cues?
Yes.
How does mindful eating help us tune into those?
Well, one of the most important cues is our sense of fullness, right? Mindful eating encourages us to pay attention to those subtle signals from our bodies that tell us, hey, you've had enough. It's about eating until you're satisfied, not stuffed.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have gotten so out of touch with those signals. We just eat on autopilot.
Right. We ignore our body's wisdom.
And then we wonder why we feel so blah afterwards.
Exactly. And it can lead to overeating, digestive discomfort, even feelings of guilt or shame.
Ugh, yeah, I've been there.
Right. But mindful eating helps us break free from those patterns and reconnect with our innate ability to regulate our food intake.
Okay, but how do we actually do that?
Well, one simple but effective technique is to pause during your meal, maybe halfway through,
Okay.
and just ask yourself, am I still hungry or am I starting to feel comfortably satisfied?
It's like checking in with your stomach.
Exactly, instead of just mindlessly shoveling food into your mouth.
Right, right.
Another helpful tip is to pay attention to your breath.
Okay.
You know, when you're truly hungry, your breath tends to be a bit deeper and slower. And then as you eat and become more satisfied, your breath might become a little bit shallower or faster.
Wow. I never thought about connecting my breath to my eating habits.
It's a subtle but powerful connection.
Interesting.
It's a reminder that mindful eating is about cultivating a deeper awareness of all the sensations and experiences that are happening within our bodies.
Sort of like turning our attention inward almost.
Exactly, becoming more attuned to those subtle whispers of wisdom.
I like that.
And that awareness can extend beyond just physical sensations.
Okay.
Mindful eating also invites us to pay attention to our thoughts and emotions around food.
Ooh, yeah, that's a big one.
Is right.
I feel like we all have so much baggage around food.
We do.
All this guilt and shame and judgment.
Yeah, we've been bombarded with messages about what we should and shouldn't eat, what's good and what's bad.
Exactly.
But mindful eating encourages us to let go of those rigid rules
Okay.
and approach food with a sense of curiosity and compassion.
So instead of labeling foods as off limits or forbidden, we can just see them as choices,
Choices, exactly.
each with its own benefits and consequences.
And when we approach food with that kind of open-minded curiosity, we're more likely to make choices that truly nourish us, both physically and emotionally.
This is so cool. It's like mindful eating isn't just a set of techniques, it's a whole mindset shift.
It is, and it's a shift that can benefit us in countless ways, from improving our digestion, regulating our weight, to reducing stress, and cultivating a more positive relationship with food.
Wow, we've covered so much already.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about the principles, the sensory experience, the emotional side of things.
We have.
Where do we go from here with this mindful eating exploration?
I think it's time to address the big question. How do we actually integrate mindful eating into our busy, often chaotic lives?
Right.
It's easy to talk about slowing down and savoring when you're sitting down to a leisurely meal. But what about those grab-and-go lunches or late-night snacks?
Yeah, that's the real world challenge, isn't it?
It is. Like, how do we make mindful eating a sustainable habit, something that fits into our everyday lives?
Yeah.
I'm really eager to explore that.
Let's do it. Let's delve into those practical strategies and see how we can bridge the gap between intention and action.
All right. So we've got the philosophy. We've got all these like sensory delights of mindful eating.
Yeah.
But, you know, let's be real. Most of us don't live in a Zen retreat, right?
Ah.
Like, how do we make this actually work in the real world?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And thankfully, our sources offer some really practical advice.
Okay, good.
One thing they emphasize is starting small.
Okay.
You know, you don't have to overhaul your entire eating style overnight.
That's a relief because that sounds really daunting. So
Yeah.
where do we begin?
Just pick one meal a day or even just one snack and commit to being fully present while you eat it.
Okay.
Put away your phone, turn off the TV,
Yeah.
and just savor each bite.
So just like creating these little pockets of mindfulness
Exactly.
throughout the day. Yeah, and as you get more comfortable with that, you can gradually expand your practice to other meals and snacks.
I like that. That sounds very doable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our sources also talk about cultivating gratitude as part of mindful eating.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
This is one of my favorite parts, honestly.
Okay.
Before you start eating, take a moment to acknowledge the food in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Think about where it came from, the people who grew it, harvested it, prepared it,
Right.
and just express gratitude for the nourishment it's about to provide.
So it's like we're shifting from this mindset of like entitlement to one of appreciation.
Exactly. And that simple act of gratitude can really transform your whole eating experience.
I can see that.
You know, it can make you feel more connected to your food, more satisfied with what you have, less likely to overeat.
Yeah, it's like you're almost infusing the meal with this positive energy.
Mm-hmm.
But what about those times when mindfulness kind of goes out the window?
Yeah.
You know, we all have those moments where we're just like mindlessly munching on chips or cookies.
Of course we're human.
Exactly. How do we deal with those slip-ups?
Well, first of all, remember that mindful eating is not about perfection.
Okay.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Right.
So if you find yourself halfway through a bag of chips without even realizing it, don't beat yourself up.
Right.
Just notice it, acknowledge it, and maybe make a different choice next time.
It's that non-judgmental approach again.
Exactly.
Sacking back.
Right.
But is there anything we can do in those moments to kind of bring ourselves back to the present?
Absolutely. One of our sources suggests taking 3 conscious breaths before you continue eating.
Okay.
That can help to break the autopilot cycle and bring your attention back to the experience.
So like hitting the pause button on the mindless munching.
Exactly. And you can use that pause to ask yourself, am I still enjoying this? Do I really want another bite? Or am I just eating out of habit?
It's like checking in with yourself before you just keep going.
Right. And if you decide to keep going, that's totally fine.
Right.
But try to savor those next few bites with full awareness.
Right.
Notice the flavors, the textures, the sensations in your mouth.
So even those mindless moments can become like these mini mindfulness practices.
Exactly. And over time, as you become more aware of your eating habits, you'll naturally start to make more conscious choices.
It's like we're rewiring our brains.
Right.
Creating new pathways for mindful eating.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do want to talk about some of the challenges because, life is busy, schedules get hectic.
Of course.
How do we make mindful eating like a sustainable habit amidst all the chaos?
Well, one strategy that I find really helpful is planning ahead.
Okay.
If you know you're going to have a busy day, pack a healthy lunch and snacks so you're not tempted to grab something unhealthy on the go.
So setting ourselves up for success.
Exactly.
I like that.
And another helpful tip is to create a mindful eating space in your home.
Oh.
Yeah, this could be a designated spot at your kitchen table or even just a cozy corner where you can sit comfortably and enjoy your meals without distractions.
It's like creating these little sanctuaries for mindful eating.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay. But what about eating out with friends or family?
Yeah,
It can feel kind of awkward to be the only one who's not digging into the breadbasket
right.
or chatting away during the meal.
I understand that. And, mindful eating doesn't mean you have to become a hermit.
Right.
You can still enjoy the company of others, but maybe take a few moments during the meal to pause, take a breath, and appreciate your food.
So those mini mindfulness breaks that we talked about,
Exactly.
we can kind of sprinkle them in
You've got it.
without it being weird.
Right. And remember, mindful eating is a personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
There's no right or wrong way to do it. Experiment with different techniques. Find what works best for you. And be patient with yourself along the way.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. We've gone beyond the buzzwords and really explored the nuances of mindful eating.
Yeah.
From the science to the practical tips, I feel inspired
Good.
to bring more awareness to my own eating habits.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, mindful eating is not about deprivation or restriction.
Right?
It's about cultivating a deeper connection with food, with our bodies, with the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's about rediscovering the joy and nourishment that eating can bring.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining me on this delicious journey of mindful eating.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, happy mindful eating.